Welcome, everyone, to our webinar, U.S. Defense Sector Opportunities for Lithuanian Companies. It's great to see so many of you joining us today. My name is Pranciškus, and I work at the Innovation Agency, where I help our defense and security companies grow internationally. Today, I'll be your moderator for this session. Right now, at the Innovation Agency Lithuania, together with our diplomats, we are planning a trade mission to US, alongside the North American Lithuanian Business Forum. Our partner, California-based nonprofit DTI, supports the development of the defense and space industries. And together, today, we want to give you a deeper insight into the US defense ecosystem. In a moment, we'll hear from a DTI expert about the insights, and it will be followed by your questions. You can post them via Facebook, and we'll address those submitted in advance as well. But to start, I'll hand over to our commercial attaché, Andrius Sankauskas, for a brief on the trade mission and the forum. Andrius, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Pranciškus. Thank you, Drew, for participating and giving us valuable knowledge. I will switch to Lithuanian for a couple of minutes, as I want to introduce for Lithuanian companies the main concept of the event. Sveiki visi. Pas mus ankstyvas rytas Los Andžele, laukiame jūsų visų jau čia atvykstant šį balandį ir norėčiau pranešti, kas dar negirdėjote, jau yra patvirtintos datos, kad Šiaurės Amerikos Lietuvos forumas vyks balandžio 27-29 dienomis, taigi paprašyčiau pasižymėti jau šias datas. Kaip atrodys šių metų forumas? 27-28 dienomis mes turėsime sektorinės misijas ir 29 dieną turėsime pagrindinę jau jo dalį, kur bus tokia jau generinė. Kokios šiai dienai patvirtintos yra industrijos? Tai, ką mes šiandieną kalbame, gynybos ir kosmoso, ICT, kūrybinės industrijos ir food techas, maistas, agritechas. Iš esmės padengsime šitas keturias industrijas, keturis sektorius ir fokusuosimės taip, kad pirmadienį, antradienį, tai yra 27-28 dienomis, mes turėsime jau tokias techninės, gilesnės diskusijas su čia esančiais industrijos žaidėjais. Jau yra patvirtinta, kad kaip tik turėsime dar papildomą renginį ir su DTI, tai sukluskite gynybos ir kosmoso sektoriaus įmonių atstovai. Turėsime labai, manau, neblogą kartu renginį su DTI, kur jau esame sutarę, kad jie pakvies ir savo atstovus. Tai pagrindinis tikslas būtų dabar pradėti jau komunikuoti dėl šios misijos, kur pagrindinis kontaktas Lietuvoje bus Pranciškus, su juo bus visa koordinacija. Ir jeigu turėsite kažkokių tai klausimų, visada galite kreiptis ir į mane tiesiogiai, bet pradedame jau tiesioginę komunikaciją apie šį renginį ir lauksime jūsų jau susidomėjimo bei registracijų ir pradėsime diskutuoti, koks galėtų būti tas galutinis poreikis, koks galėtų būti įmonių konkrečiai aplankymo tikslas ir čia indikacija, ką mes labiausiai norėtume pamatyti ir su kuo susitikti. Tai lauksiu jūsų minčių, susisiekite būtinai su Pranciškum ir linkiu įdomaus ir naudingo webinaro.
Ačiū, Andriu. Thank you, Andrius. So let's come back to our webinar, and I'm very pleased to welcome our expert of the day from DTI, Drew Busby, and he will give you a presentation and some insights into how the US defense and space ecosystem is working today. And after his presentation, we will go through the questions that were sent in beforehand, but also if you would like to post your new questions, you can do that via Facebook. Drew, the floor is yours, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I guess good morning or good evening. It's still dark in Los Angeles, but we're already starting to heat up. It'll probably be 75 degrees and sunny. So we do hope to see a lot of you out here for the event that was mentioned at the beginning. For folks that don't know me, I guess my name is Drew Busby. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of DTI. Super excited to bring this to you today. The first half of this presentation is really going to be focused on opportunities, how you get your foot in the door very much on the broad sense. And then the second half of this presentation is really geared towards tactical advice and tactical steps that I have used to help companies navigate federal procurement, as well as kind of our local ecosystem here within the US and then Los Angeles as well. We refer to this, we do this very often. We call these our launchpad sessions because we very much want to give you a launchpad to doing business with the DOW, federal government, and of course, the US. I like my job. I'd like to keep my job, so I always have to introduce the organization as a whole. So as mentioned, DTI is a nonprofit. We don't charge for any of our services. We may do a ticketed event here and there, but we're very much meant to democratize access. We fully believe that founders, if they're not successful, it's not because of technology and it's not because of the founder, it's because they lack the access to knowledge, resources, and capital. So it's very much our goal and our mission to democratize that access, give you the advice, give you the support without putting all of that behind a paywall. Probably our most forward-facing program that many of you will experience if you come out here is the Bridge. The Bridge is more than a physical place. It is our collaboration program. It's 21,000 square feet. This is operated through a mechanism called APIA, which is a partnership intermediary agreement with the United States Space Force. Year over year, we host about 92 events, all of those around private capital, startup, government. We have hosted several delegations, and of course, including the Lithuanians. But everyone from the UK to Canada to Australia have come through our doors, all trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way for us to grow and scale as a defense and space ecosystem as a whole. As mentioned, we are hyper-focused on giving you guys the resources, tool, and collective knowledge to be successful as you grow and scale your companies within our ecosystem. How do we get after this? So as mentioned, we do a ton of events. We do host one-on-one office hours. You're more than welcome to book time with me or my team. You'll have our contact info at the end of this. We're happy to grab time to jump on a Zoom call, or if you're in person, grab a whiteboard, work through any questions, comments, any of those kind of things that you might be interested in. We host a variety of networking and mixer activities. We hosted one yesterday around Milcom PNT, hosting our next cohort of companies. We do a variety of partner events, colliders, and workshops, and of course, sessions like this. And I do want to call out, we do run an accelerator program. The uniqueness of that is backed by what is called a SpaceWorks Phase 2 Challenge via the SBIR program, which I'll go into more detail here in a second. But those folks coming through, they get access to my team for 12 weeks of dedicated support and then become part of our robust alumni network. Historically, these companies have gone on to do about 1.62 billion in follow-on government contracts and about 2.1 billion in private capital investment post-program. Additionally, if you go onto our website, you can see opportunities for rideshare if you're looking to do payload integration, how you navigate cybersecurity and then ATOs within the government. And then we also are rolling out our robust private capital initiative. That's a kind of a tiered system and how we're getting after bringing in private capital, the right folks, keeping out what we refer to as adversarial capital, or the bad guys, getting on your cap table, rolling all of that out. We do this, time and time again, multiple events a week. This is very much our hyper focus here. So getting started within the federal government, very much so your path starts here. So we'll talk about some SBIR and STTR as well as your early pathways. So SBIR, STTR, I do want to caveat that this program is currently going through the reauthorization process within our Congress and our government, but historically this is a program that has been around since 1982. It is it's the US's essentially seed fund. This is how we are investing in commercial technology, very much to transition it into a federal use case. This program was originally created, one, obviously to stimulate technological innovation. We as the government, right, we believe that, hey, we have long lead times. We can invest in companies, we can invest in technology so that we can benefit from in the future. We're willing to be that first adopter. Secondly, we want to use small business to meet our federal R&D needs. We do want to encourage participation from folks in our ecosystem that maybe don't have access to capital. I like to joke, if you don't have a rich Uncle Kevin, how do you get your company started? Well, this is one of the ways that you can get that early seed funding to be able to do that. And then also, as we kind of notice, commercial innovation very much so has outpaced government innovation over the last couple decades. And so we want to encourage those big tech companies or those companies that are about to become big tech companies to consider working with the US government, considering building solutions for the warfighter, the end user, to kind of help our national defense ecosystem here. Eligibility. So one, I'll talk about this briefly, and I do have the next slide that will say, hey, wait a minute, this is Lithuania. How do I, as a Lithuanian company, navigate? So in terms of eligibility for a lot of these early programs, you have to be located in the US, you have to be organized for profit, no more than 500 employees. This is how you classify as a small business, and then no more than 50% ownership by individuals who are permanent residents, green card holders, citizens of the United States, et cetera. And you do have to register on our system. So sam.gov is where many of these government opportunities are posted. And then you do need to register with a small business association to be able to navigate a lot of these early stage opportunities. Now, how does this look if I'm a Lithuanian company and I say, hey, how do I get started in the US government? Well, usually the way that this looks like, and we as a broader we here as a US and a lot of these innovation organizations are actively working on ways that we can work with international companies much more seamlessly. As of right now, the way that usually looks like is that international company establishes a US entity or subsidiary. Usually that means that the principal investigator, the prime person running that entity, is out here in the US, and most of that development happens here in the US. As long as the magic number is really 51, as long as you're maintaining that 51%, you're eligible for most of these programs coming through. You can also subcontract. So you may have a US entity that is actively competing on contracts such as SBIR or OTAs. You can be a subcontract on that, or you can partner with a US entity as a whole. So this could be you both go for a SBIR solicitation with you being the sub. Those are ways for you to navigate, get your foot in the door, and then grow and scale until ultimately either you can establish presence in the US, or we can amplify or redo some of our ways for us to work with international companies. I do want to call this out. SBIR as a program is not just the DOW. We actually have 11 federal agencies that leverage this program. Historically, this is about $3.3 to $3.4 billion every single year. Not to show too much of my acquisitions nerdiness, but this is RDT&E, so Research and Development, Test and Engineering Funds. Any organization in our federal government that does more than $100 million every single year in research and development essentially pays a tax when Congress appropriates the money, is then doled out across these agencies to go after these SBIR awards. These are executed either via grants, a little bit different, or fixed firm price contracts, which the DOW leverages. Now, as you're getting started, we have a lot of organizations for you to know. First kind of hit out, if you will, I would hyper focus on these 6. AFWERX is the innovation arm of the United States Air Force. This is the sister organization to SpaceWorks, who we as DTI primarily work with. SpaceWorks, of course, is the innovation arm of the US Space Force. Both of these entities fall under an entity called AFRL, which is the Air Force Research Lab. Army DevCom, it's the Army version of this. They also have a program called Fuse, which is how they get after their SBIR and some of their private capital work. The Marine Innovation Unit at the bottom left, these are our Marines. There's not necessarily a funding opportunity there, but there is usually opportunities for what I'm going to call exercises or testing, where you're able to get your technology into the hands of the warfighter. The U.S. Navy has recently kind of rebuilt the way that they're getting after. They have just launched the Navy RCO, the Rapid Capability Office. We're actually going to welcome them in February as well, so they'll be out here, so that's something to put on your calendar as well. And then many folks might know DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit. These are folks up in Silicon Valley, where a lot of our private capital firms live and breathe. They are the organization that has really piloted what we call commercial solutions openings. And they are also an entity that has done a lot of work on the international side. Recently, they did an AUKUS challenge with Australian and UK companies. They have done XPRIZE or funding organization or funding opportunities with India and a few other international companies. That's someone to look at if you're saying, hey, I don't know if I want to build a US entity or I'm not quite ready to partner. Look at some of the DIU opportunities. They're going to be a little bit more focused on probably what we call TRL 8 or 9. So very much developed, technologies, maybe not so much on the early stage. But those are folks to reach out to, understand, hey, what are different solicitations? Some of these folks take unsolicited white papers, but almost all of them have forward-facing entities or forward-facing opportunities to get to know them, get connected, and get plugged in. All right, biggest way for you guys to leverage this. We as a federal government, the big emphasis is on dual use technology. So the way to do SBIR is really minimize that tech risk. So SBIR is non-dilutive financing is what we refer to it as, meaning that we are investing in a technology, but we do not sit on your cap table. We're not taking equity. We're asking for a return on capability, not necessarily a financial return on investment. And so this is an opportunity for you as a founder, rather than taking private capital or much more expensive forms of financing, to get plugged in, establish this dual use case. Let's say you are already building a commercial product. This is a great way for you to also get your foot into the door to working with the federal market. We've had plenty of companies come through that have used DoD or DoW funding to build out the technology and then have fully pivoted to the commercial sector. I don't know if you guys have a Roomba, but Roomba is a robot vacuum cleaner for folks that don't know. That is actually a defense project that was funded through the US Army and DARPA. This is the part of the story that I don't know if it's 100% true, but it's really good for the story. They had a demo going out where they were testing their robot. They built out their mapping algorithm, and for them to do the test, they put a vacuum cleaner on the front, said, oh crap, we have a solution here, sold off their defense line, and now they are a very viable commercial company. That is something that you can use this program, or you can use these early funding opportunities to do. It's very, very much so unique to this type of funding environment. And then, as mentioned, we don't sit on your cap table. We don't take an equity position. This is a great way to bootstrap, get plugged in. We've seen plenty of founders get into, the dozens up to the hundreds of million in terms of valuation, just by leveraging the SBIR and STTR program before they even start taking on private capital. Now, what do these, early funding mechanisms look like? Well, one of these programs is called STTR, which is the Small Business Technology Transfer. This is a very unique mechanism kind of in our ecosystem because it is designed for you to partner with a research university or like nonprofit partner. What's unique about this is typically this is very early stage TRL, ideation, very early testing, very lab heavy in terms of figuring out if this use case works. You do have to have a formal relationship with that university system. In terms of awards, a phase 1 is 110K, phase 2 is up to 1.8. And then I do like to call out that you are co-developing something with a university. So make sure that your IP rights, your IP agreements are squared away before you enter that. If this is something you're interested in, start that outreach now, because very much so you'll have to navigate those tech transfer offices that each of them have their own unique process, folks to talk to, things of that nature. Now, as mentioned, SBIR, this is the Small Business Innovation Research. As mentioned, this is about $3.2 to $3.3 billion every single year. Historically, for example, SpaceWorks or the US Space Force has had about $500 million of this pot of money. This is the way that we execute this. Phase 1 is a feasibility study. So this is very much meant for you to go and do customer to customer for your technology that you are essentially pitching. On the open topic side, so this is executed open topic and specific topic, you're looking at $75,000 for that 3-month period of performance. Specific topic is 180K. Okay. Now, what we mean by open topic and specific, open topic is a general call, kind of anybody can participate. And then specific topic is a very much more, the way that I like to explain it, and then a specific topic is what kind of pizza do you want, right? There's still some ambiguity. There's still an ability to say, hey, I have a little bit something, something that's a little bit more innovative that we want to plug in. However, we kind of have a general scope. Now on the phase 2 side, this is meant to develop and to deliver a prototype. So open topic side, 1.25 million, specific topic side, 2 million, up to a 24-month period of performance. So you don't always have to do the full 24 months when you're proposing. However, you do have that kind of top level ceiling on how long it will take you to build that prototype. We're not necessarily, when you go on one of these awards, we're not necessarily looking for a fully fleshed out solution. If you're like, hey, I can build a rocket ship to Mars for $2 million. If you can really do that, shoot me a LinkedIn. Like, I'll come join your company tomorrow. That sounds like you know what you're doing. But with that, we do want to see like some meaningful development. So I'd like to say, hey, the thing needs to turn on. We need to be able to see some type of demo, some type of something that shows, hey, we're making meaningful progression towards transitioning this technology into an actual in case or some type of operational usability. Now, if you're looking at this and you're like, hey, I've got my US entity, I've got my partner, or, I'm starting to get my foot in the door, which one makes the most sense for me? This isn't hard, fast. These are kind of my recommendations. I've seen people be really successful as sitter. I've seen people, go other pathways. If your technology is still needing some proof of concept, it's early TRL, it's early in terms of like, how am I building this? A phase one might be the right move for you, especially if you're like, hey, how do I navigate some of these program offices? How do I navigate the DOW? That's probably a good starting point. If you already have established a customer, say you come out for, the event and you say, hey, I met this customer, they love my stuff, they want to sign a customer memorandum. Phase two might be better for you because you already have that customer. And then as mentioned on that second point, if you already are like, hey, I don't quite know where I want to fit or things like that, typically phase one is where you want to fit. Now, I will call this out. This is a thing that I see people kind of struggle with when they're saying, hey, I want to do open topic, specific topic. If there's ever a solicitation or a partner agency or a customer that either offers a specific topic or a solicitation that matches you, or perhaps they have a contract vehicle that you can already navigate through, then that's probably the solicitation to go after or the opportunity to go after. Those are very rare. When you have a round peg, round hole, perfect fit, love at first sight kind of meeting, those are the solicitations that I always say that you should prioritize because they're not going to come around as often. They're not always going to feel like, hey, maybe this was written for me. So those are the ones that I always say, hey, that takes top priority over any of the other opportunities that might be out there. This is what our submission typically looks like. I do caveat this is that whenever you are proposing to the government or you're proposing to an agency, please make sure that you read that solicitation in full. Do you want to make sure that you are following the guidelines, you're doing everything that you possibly need to do to be successful on that. But typically our technical volume, this is your detailed project plan, your objectives, methodology. This is essentially, hey, what am I going to be building? We want to see that, hey, the principal investigator, the person that is proposing this understands what they're doing, what they're building, and has the ability to do so. A company commercialization report. So as mentioned, hyper focus on dual use. So we don't want you to just be, hey, I'm going to do a bunch of R&D, I'm going to do a bunch of like sciencey kind of stuff, and maybe it becomes a product, maybe it doesn't. We want to see that. We want to see very much like an investor that, hey, there is a TAM, SAM, SOM. We want to see what's the plan to transition this. How is this going to become a product that we can buy? The third piece is that cost volume. So one of the things I see companies stumble with very, very often when they're proposing is that they come in over budget. I mentioned those funding limits a little bit earlier. If you come in over budget, that's an automatic DQ. As an evaluator, someone who's to evaluate these proposals, those are the ones that you feel bad for doing, but that's an immediate DQ. We can't read that full proposal because you came in over budget. DSIP, which is the DoD SBIR Innovation Portal, that is the intake for these proposals, has an online tool that allows you to do that and build it. So you can see, hey, where are my expenses? It includes your labor, even includes a little bit of profit maybe that you're making off of this. All of that will be broken down in there and allow you to build it and see what you're fully submitting to. We do want to see your company, certifications, make sure you're, a legal entity, all that kind of stuff. And then the PI, I do want to call this out. Your PI is the person that is basically responsible for this as a project. And so we want to make sure that that person has the technical, maturity, technical depth to be able to deliver. And then if you have any other key personnel that are participating or supporting that particular, solicitation, we want to see them as well. Really important here, really want to see relevant experience. So if you have someone, who has a PhD in aerospace engineering, that's probably someone who should be your principal investigator on these kind of efforts. So make sure you put those people forward. Letters of support, I call this out because I have seen folks stumble with this. When it's optional, it's not necessarily a value, but you do have people reviewing your solicitation. So letters of support very often can be votes of confidence from different units, stakeholders, maybe some of the primes, et cetera, that say, hey, we think this technology is very, very valuable. If this was funded, if this was, something that we could go buy, we would be interested in buying that. If you can secure those, great. One of the call outs is, hey, it might call for a customer memorandum. Letters of support are not necessarily the same, so make sure that you follow your solicitations to the T when you are reading those solicitations. And then we want to see a work plan, right? You're able to build and kind of negotiate your milestones and the funding that's required to build kind of each one. But we do want to see a meaningful plan to go through this full process. Very much so kind of anything that, hits sales, very much relationship driven. So one of the ways to prove that you are a great performer and that you'll be available and, hey, we can count on you in the long term is to have that great work plan and then deliver on that work plan, on time, on budget, and within scope. Historical release window, just so you guys know, there are tons of opportunities that come through this program every single year. Not every single DoD or DoW organization and not every single federal organization will participate in every single window, but you'll see them all the time. New topics, I believe, are released every Wednesday or the first Wednesday of the month. So once everything is reauthorized, go back in there, see the new topics. I do think it's important to cover this because when this goes live, it is going to move fast. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to get your foot in the door there as well. Now, I do want to call this out. This is a unique mechanism that we offer. StratFi and TACFi, these are exclusive to the DAF, which is the Department of the Air Force. So on that early slide where I talked about AFWorks and SpaceWorks, it's those two organizations that support this vehicle. These are continuations of your phase 2. So that means that you can't just go phase 1 to StratFi, TACFi. You can't just, come in early stage. You can't go STTR. You need to have an SBIR phase 2. It is our strategic funding increase. Why this matters is this is a matching function for private capital and customer dollars. When you see a StratFi opportunity, that means you are executing on a phase 2. Your government customer is super excited about what you're building, you're showing great promise. They will push you forward for a StratFi. We are asking a program office that is supporting you to commit funding. That is matched 1-to-1 with those SBIR dollars. And then we also ask for you to go out and secure private capital investment. This can look like government money, it can look like Lithuanian investors, it can look like US investors, cannot look like adversarial capital. So, I'll just say the bad guys, can't look like the bad guys. And so within that, we essentially do this matching function. These as funding vehicles, $15 million in SBIR is the threshold, but I see companies walk away with $45 million, $60 million contract opportunities by leveraging this vehicle. We also have our TACFi, a little bit smaller funding amounts, about that $2 million range, but it's a 1-to-1 private capital match. Now, calling out phase 3s, this is a unique mechanism. Everything that I've been talking about so far is a competitive process, meaning that you have to submit to a opportunity, you have to be put forward, et cetera, et cetera. Phase 3 is a little bit of a misnomer. It's not a contract vehicle itself. It is a justification to enter a contract via sole source. So when you are executing on a SBIR phase 1, SBIR phase 2, you're working with that program office or that government customer. They can use your SBIR phase 1, SBIR phase 2, the work that we have already invested in and you have already done to issue you a sole source contract, meaning you do not have to go back through a recompetitive process. It is the customer funds only. You are no longer existing on SBIR dollars. We can use any kind of money. So what we mean by kind is the colors or the appropriation categories. So you can have research and development, you can have procurement, you can have operations and maintenance. Any of those things can be available. We can build this vehicle uniquely to how that product or end state is supposed to look. And then you do maintain your SBIR data rights, meaning that, hey, you can go and build this as a commercial entity. The US government will use this for, military or US government purposes. But you're able to continue kind of going forward and building both a commercial company. It's not just a, hey, now I have to solely work on the DOW. These vehicles get huge. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, up to billions of dollars. Very likely this is executed through things that we call an IDIQ, which is an indefinite deliverable, indefinite quantity, different kind of contract vehicles. So don't hyper focus on that. Focus on, hey, if I go through SBIR or STTR, I can be sole source a contract based off the work that I'm doing with my customer. And there's no dollar limit, no time limit. It can be as big as that customer is willing to support you for. Here's the matching kind of matrix here, as I mentioned, for folks that are interested in StratFi TACFi. This is what it looks like. So again, those 1-to-1 matches, and then that 1-to-2 there on the dual use side as well. You can only go defense if you are thinking, hey, I'm not necessarily interested in taking on private capital. It does require the government customer to give you a little bit more money in terms of what they are committing to get those matching numbers where you would like them. Now, I introduced a whole lot of different things. Tactically, I always teach this as the lily pad approach. So it's not just, hey, let me go get this one contract, execute on this one contract, and then I'm good. You need to be consistently competing, consistently submitting for different opportunities because people change and ebb and flow. Selling to the government is very much like enterprise sales, meaning you might be selling into one office or one command and they might be super interested, and then that person leaves or transitions or retires or et cetera. And so you need to kind of go back to the well in terms of finding another opportunity. The way that these things typically fall, you maybe get a phase 1 that's really just a research, trying to figure it out. Maybe you couldn't quite find a customer for it. Maybe you get a phase 1, you do find a customer, you get that phase 3. I have seen a company go from phase 1 to phase 3. So you're talking that 75K to, dozens, if not $100+ million contracts. I will caveat that that was a software company that was very commercially viable already, and they kind of just needed to build it out for a DOW use case. So very rare, but definitely possible. Or what you have typically for space companies is phase 2s, multiple phase 2s, then executing on a StratFi TACFi. Usually that results in some type of meaningful on-orbit demo, and then ultimately a phase 3 opportunity. Companies like Varda, very similar to kind of their trajectory and the work that they've done and how they've gotten on orbit and how they've built repeatable business with the federal government. Other early pathways that I want to call out. We do have what are called CRADAs. CRADAs are cooperative research and development agreements. This is an agreement you do with the lab, allows you to essentially share information, have formal conversations. We use this essentially to figure out, one, market research, what types of technological innovation we can go after. You as a company, it's an opportunity for you to get basically the opportunity to work on actual government systems. So when you are trying to figure out if your prototype works, as opposed to using non-real data or, synthetic data or something you made up yourself, you're actually using government data, government resources, does give you the opportunity to actually, share people, facilities, equipment back and forth. OTAs, I'll call this out. OTAs are other transaction authorities. We are governed by what is called the FAR, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. This is essentially the law around how the federal government does procurement. OTAs fall slightly outside of that scope. This is a special authority that allows customer organizations to do contracting in a much more flexible way. The easiest way to understand this is if we tried to acquire software, if I started today and did a traditional waterfall acquisition, by the time I could acquire the software that I originally wanted, it's already outdated because of how fast software develops. Things like OTAs allow us to actually get those things on contract, start working with those. This is especially beneficial for non-traditional vendors, specifically startups, because it moves like the speed of a startup. OTAs, the way that you go after, I mentioned DIU. DIU has OTA opportunities. Some customer organizations have direct OTA authority. So the only way for you to figure that out is really connecting with them. Or there are entities called consortia. One of the ones out here at Space Systems Command is called SPEC, which is the Space Enterprise Consortium. They have OTA authority where you are part of this consortium, part of this group club, if you will, where OTA opportunities are then released. You can do R&D, you can do prototype, and very often too, you can actually have these go on to do production. And so you can kind of continue to stack these OTA awards that move at the speed that you move as a federal or as a contractor trying to work with the federal government. You can also look out, the service labs will do technical challenge calls. These are opportunities to do demos, sometimes paid, sometimes unpaid. It's really another market research thing that we are looking out there to do. And then many of the primes, right? So I mentioned, hey, teaming is a way to get your foot in the door. It's a great way for you to start putting, try to build out this US entity to navigate other opportunities. Start engaging with some of the primes, look for some of their internal, research and development projects. Look at some of the neo primes, the Andurils, things like that, that might have an opportunity to sub or get on a demo, or subcontract parts of that as well. I will say this, if you can do demos, if you can do exercises, if you can do these things to get in front of customers and demonstrate real operational usability, those are like great ways to like hyperdrive your access, your government contracting opportunities, because you're demoing the thing in real time. Now, that's the first half of this presentation. I am going to take you through a little bit of my tactical advice on how to navigate and actually do this. As someone who helps our cohort of companies comes through, I've done kind of BD on both the outside, inside. I've supported private capital. I've been an evaluator, and these are kind of the lessons that I have learned to be the most applicable for startups that are really interested in this space. The biggest thing that I see people stumble with, the Department of War now, formerly the DoD, it's not a single customer, meaning it's not a single, you don't walk into the store and say, I'm here to sell to the DoW. You are selling to individual people. And so you need to establish connections, build relationships with folks across these groups. The way that I like to think about this, you have users, you have buyers or customers, you have funders, and then you have influencers. Fundamentally, for you to have success with the federal government, you really need three things. You need a contract vehicle, which is actually the authority to be able to enter into this agreement. A contract you're executing, you need money. So you need appropriated money or some type of money that is the correct quote unquote color or the correct use case for the activity that you're pursuing. And then you need a customer, right? If you can identify those three, and many of these opportunities come with one or maybe two of those, that is how you establish your beachheads across these different commands and ecosystems as well. The best way to think of this is users use the tech, customers write the check. So if you're saying, hey, I'm going to support soldiers that are doing this mission, those are going to be your users, but there is some program office that is writing checks, buying capability for them. You need to find both. And then who's funding that? Does that customer have funds available? Or do you need to go through one of these innovation organizations or these other funding mechanisms like SBIR, STTR to get your foot in the door? And then, of course, influencers, right? We all know, hey, you need to win friends and influence people. Dale Carnegie is probably still getting royalties off that book to this day. But you need to make sure that, hey, when I'm in there, I am connecting with people. I know who are the influential people, who are the decision makers. And as you kind of explore this, you'll start to learn who's who kind of in the zoo there. Biggest thing, right? This is my go-to-market playbook. This is how I start. Very, very much so. If you're saying, hey, I want to sell to the DoW, find a mission critical problem. The closer you can get to an operational mission, meaning, hey, this is very important because this bad guy wants to do this thing. We really care about that. The faster funding will go, the faster contracting will go, and the faster you will grow and scale as a company. The farther away you get from that, it's not that it's not important, and it's not that it's not something we care about. It's just going to take, less priority as compared to something like this. Define your wedge use case. How are you different? What are you giving this customer that is unique? The one thing I would not advise you to do is don't say, hey, like you can lay off like 20% of your people and, and save all this money. That's not necessarily a motivation, right? But we want to say, hey, you're going to get quicker decision time. You're going to get higher delta V. You're going to be able to move without regret. Those type of language, things that you hear out there, or you hear our senior leaders talk about, those are the things that a lot of these customers are care about. Position how you are different, right? Why is your approach unique? Are you so much lighter that I can put more payloads on this launch? Are you so much faster that I can get a critical decision to an operator in the field, in milliseconds as opposed to minutes? All of those things are things that we want to see. We're really driven by, or at least your customer's really driven by capability. We want more capability for the technology that we're pursuing. Then identify your initial customer and your buyer. This usually works one of two ways. You can find a customer, you can find a program office, acquisitions folks. So for your space folks out there, Space Systems Command, for example, I'm finding my customer out there, and then find who in that organization has the authority to actually obligate money, right? It's usually an 04, 05, which I'll show you the ranks here in a second. That might be able to do that, or has the technical depth to be able to say, hey, this is something we want to get after, and build that persona. Before you go into a meeting or before you talk to that person, understand what their motivations might be. What's that mission set? You can look up strategy documents. We publish a lot of stuff about, hey, next year we're interested in this kind of stuff, especially for our industry to understand how we do that. You then want to identify the acquisition pathway, so understand how that organization buys. Are they great users of SBIR Sitter? Do they do OTAs? Are they a research shop that are really focused on early stage prototypes? Start to figure out, hey, what have they awarded in the past? Prove that value. So actually do an exercise, do a demo, paid or unpaid, pursue that so you can actually show that. Essentially build that credibility, and then scale appropriately, right? If you think, hey, I can navigate across multiple DOW users, DOW customers, do so. But make sure that as you build your beachheads, you're kind of watering, those relationships, letting them grow. So don't just go all out and spray and pray, but, hyper focus on, hey, we want to deliver to these folks, and then we're going to scale accordingly out to other operational units. What I'll tell you right here is, this is a complex system that we have, but every system can be navigated. So again, think those users, funders, buyers, influencers, not just one customer. It's not just, hey, I found a guy, they really like my thing, we're good forever, we got it. We on the inside, we rotate. So if you're talking to a colonel, that person's going to retire, they're going to do a PCS, they're going to go to a new job, all of those kind of things. So make sure that you're understanding, building relationships across, and then you're maintaining those relationships, because even if someone goes on to another organization or to industry or things like that, very, very small ecosystem, those relationships still can bear fruit down the line as well. Now, I want to talk about defining a customer. So across all of our branches of service, we have what we refer to as the enlisted corps, and then the officer corps. Some of our branches of service have warrant officers. These are our Space Force. So obviously we're hyper-focused on space. These are Space Force ranks. So it's a little bit different. What I want to call out, officers, quote unquote, outrank enlisted, but that does not mean that officers have more technical depth or understanding. So never, ever, ever overpass the enlisted folks just because you see an officer rank in there. For us, typically speaking, users are on those enlisted side, and then our junior officers, because as officers, you tend to get more into administrative leadership positions, things like that, where you're overseeing a lot of folks. So you're not as operationally in the weeds necessarily. Now, of course, case dependent based off unit. Customers typically fall in those higher officer ranks, as mentioned, 05, 06 level folks. On the acquisition side, we refer to them as senior material leaders and material leaders. These are folks that are able to actually obligate funds, secure contracts, do those kind of things. And then usually our 06 and above are what we call PEOs, Program Executive Officers. This is about to shift to be PAEs, Program Acquisition Executives. They oversee the entirety of a program. So to put this in perspective, before I show you some of these next slides, GPS, right, might be 06 who's in charge of GPS, whereas a PEO is in charge of all of position, navigation, timing. SML has like a piece or a large scale program. PEO has a variety of programs, and that's kind of how we have operated historically. Now, champions, I'll call out, champions are rank agnostic. But it's that person that is leaning forward, pushing you in that office, able to answer questions, making introductions, someone with enough access, influence, and credibility to put you in front of the right people that you want to be in front of in terms of progressing your technology solution or kind of building out your federal BD. So this is a publicly available chart. Just put this out there. You see our customer PEOs. So Space Systems Command out here in LA. These are where these program offices are. Those are the folks that you'll see do reverse industry days that you'll want to talk to. They'll be at industry trade shows. And then, of course, on the bottom, you see all of our space deltas. These are where our operational communities lie. What I want to call out is you have very, very lean in terms of, how we're organized customer offices and a lot of users. So sometimes it's better to find users, sometimes it's better to find customers. What you want to make sure is that you are aligning your use case to the program office that supports the users, and you want to make sure you are defining and working with those users to make sure it is a solution that they will use. And with that customer, making sure you're delivering enough capability in terms of the budget and priority of what that program office wants to get after based off of those user requirements. Now, who's all involved in all of this? When I introduced SBIRs earlier, phase one's innovation organizations, you're going to have evaluators, topic owners, and users. These are all people that are looking at your solution. Phase twos are going to be kind of the same, but you're starting to get into some of these program offices as well. If you're interested in StratFi, TACFi, again, you're going to have to start, interacting with private capital. You're going to have your program offices. You need to be delivering on that program. Phase threes, what I would like to call out here and hyper focus on is a lot of those innovation organizations start to fall off, meaning that you need to be delivering on that customer, and that customer is the person that is making that decision. Now, we have what's called program of record, which are line items in our budget. Think F-35, think, planes, trains, automobiles, all that kind of stuff. That is when you start to get into congressional level programs, congressional level conversations, working with senators, congressmen, working with budget authorities, all of that. A lot of startups I see say, hey, I want to be a program of record from day one. That's more like a 5-year thing, but it's important to call out as well. And then what I do want to tell you is that you do have legal, contracting, and finance with you along at each step, right? So these are support organizations that support that contracting mechanism as well. For you, right, as mentioned, don't hyper focus on the big opportunity first. Pilots, micro wins, early stage demos, SBIR awards, those are the things that are the most important. You really need to focus on customer discovery first, meaning figure out who's who in the zoo, what are they interested in, what motivates them, be able to tell their story from the time that they wake up to the time that they go to conduct their mission to the time that they go to sleep before you think about, hey, what's the BD opportunity here? Because you want to get as far left as possible of an acquisition. When we put a solicitation out there, we might not be able to talk to you because we need to make sure that we have a fully competitive process. But if you're out left, you're engaging, you're having conversations, you're on a CRADA, all of those kind of things, open the door for you to be able to have those conversations. And don't wait for a proposal to drop, right? Start to create momentum by those early engagements. Find your champions, right? Like, find folks that are actively doing the mission, that you're interested in supporting. Win friends, influence people, find someone who is willing to push you forward. All of those kind of things. Think if they're using, language like we, us, we need to do this. Those are the folks that you want to hyper focus on and say, hey, this might be someone who is supporting me from a championship side. And be able to give them ConOps slide. How are they going to be able to use this technology in a mission setting? If you can provide them with those resources, briefs, and again, demos, that's how you're really getting your foot in the door. That's how you're going to know opportunities. That's how you're going to know what's coming down the pipeline in terms of giving you, opportunity to kind of connect as well. Big thing here. How do I know I found a champion? It says we, has access and influence, right? So you might have someone who's super passionate, but if they can't do an intro, can't get into the meeting, they're not that much of a champion. They're advocating for you, especially when you're not in the room, saying, hey, these folks are doing great stuff. And it's, persistent. So stay engaged with them, even when there's not an immediate ROI. Keep those customer relationships warm because small ecosystem, folks will rotate. I've seen it, I've seen my friends go through active duty, so in the military, going from program office to then going to a startup, to then going to a prime, then coming back as a support contractor. Very small ecosystem. So make sure that, you're a good steward of it and you're staying connected with those folks there as well. And then if someone is out there taking a risk and saying, hey, I have a, I'm going to go out there, I'm pushing you forward for this thing, that's someone you probably want to work with. Now, do I have product market fit? Do I have a champion? One of my mentors, Rob Slaughter, he's the founder and CEO of Defense Unicorns, just raised $130+ million Series B. The madder your user would be if someone took away your solution is the measurement of your product market fit. So if someone is super upset because you didn't get the award or you weren't selected or, you know, something else outside of, you know, your control kind of happened, those are the folks that you really want to hold on to. And those are the folks that are super beneficial to you as a company as you grow and scale. One of the things I want to call out is speak the DOW's language. I'm sorry, guys, I can't speak Lithuanian, or I would have tried to do this whole presentation in Lithuanian. But make sure that you're using terms that we understand, that we use, and that we navigate, right? So like, you know, I often say like, you know, don't go to, you know, you wouldn't go to like a sushi restaurant if you didn't like sushi kind of thing. Like use our language, talk about capability, talk about reducing downtime, reference some of the strategic documents that we put out for industry to, you know, learn from. Use those when you're in those conversations, because that's how you can get that customer, that user, to understand, hey, this is a solution that actually makes a lot of sense for me to onboard. Use our rules. Like you can read our rules. Anyone who joins my organization, I make them read the FAR. Like that's their homework. That's their onboarding. Go read the FAR. Use it, right? Use the rules. Use that as like, frankly, leverage to be able to navigate the system. Ask those questions. Use your SBIR sole source justification. Use vehicles like CRADAs. Opportunities like attaching your CRADA to an exercise can expedite that access because, again, you're doing it closer to an operational need. And always ask for examples, right? A no isn't necessarily a no. It's, wait, how do you do this? Big fan of, instead of saying, can we do this? It's how do we do this? So do that very much so when you're engaging with folks, having those conversations. Your ability to navigate the FAR, both as a contracting and a BD person, it exceptionally makes you much, much more successful in terms of getting your foot in the door. Always ask questions, always ask questions, always ask questions. At the end of the day, always ask questions. And if you don't have any more questions, read the FAR. Like that is how you do this. Understand like, hey, some organizations don't have authority. Is there someone else that has authority? Questions like, hey, is there already an existing contract vehicle that we can leverage as well? All of those things can unlock mechanisms, but no one will necessarily put that forward. You've got to be able to ask those questions. So read our guides, read our RFPs, read our budget documents that we put out there. That's how you're going to be able to navigate a lot of these early opportunities. And then stay persistent. I see founders get discouraged because they go in, they get one award or they don't get an award and they just kind of throw their hands up. Be persistent. I like to say this is home run baseball, meaning you might need a couple swings at bat, but when you hit one, you'll knock it out of the park. So very much so, stay connected. You know, hey, your unique position, I have known for a fact, and I'll save the names to protect the innocent, I guess. But I know folks that have been selected because they were easier to work with and much more flexible and delivered faster, as opposed to a more established competitor in this space, right? Leverage the fact that you are a startup, you're non-traditional, you're different, for you to get your foot in the door. And when you're executing, make sure you prove that point of, hey, I'm a great partner to deliver this capability to the end user and to the warfighter. Now, that was a lot. I talked for probably 50 minutes. These are our contacts. You're welcome to reach out to folks. That's our Luma page. Come to stuff. That's my email. That's me. That's it. I don't have an admin. I don't have an executive assistant. So you can reach me directly. You know, if I don't get back to you right away, just ping me a couple times, and I'll get back to you. We can grab time. I'm happy to jump on a webinar, hopefully a little bit after 7 a.m., but always happy to talk to you guys. So yeah, I'll turn it over for questions.
Yes, Drew, thank you very much. This was an insightful presentation, and we can see that the US system is quite expensive, but if you know where to start and how to navigate it, and maybe with your help as well, it's absolutely possible, even for companies coming from allies, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. So moving on to questions. Now, Drew, looking at the Lithuanian defense and security ecosystem, I would say that in terms of companies, we have two groups. We have companies that have commercialized products that can be used by end users and are sold to militaries, be it here in Lithuania or in Europe or somewhere else in the world. Also in this group, we have startups who are creating products. And also we have another group of companies, so component manufacturers, companies who are looking to enter or are already in the defense space and are providing their components as tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers. And now your presentation delved deep into the first group, and the first question would be this a bit of a simplified question, but still, if you had a company here in Lithuania, right, that has a product, TRL6 and up, maybe TRL9 already commercialized, and they want to storm the US market, what are the first 3 steps that you would take?
So I'll say let's say I'll give you a startup. So let's not say you're the size of like a Prime, right? You're not a Lockheed Martin or Boeing or whatever. You're startup, less than 500 employees. First thing, I would establish that US presence. I would then start looking at some of the later stage opportunities. I would look at OTAs. I would look at folks like DIU. I would still look at your SBIR sitters. So don't just think, hey, SBIR is just for like the early guys. You can still leverage that to get your foot in the door. For example, Astroscale, Japanese company, IPO'd, right? Japanese company built a US entity, went after, got established with some SBIR phase 2s. They then went and IPO'd, and then they're a successful contractor kind of across the ecosystem. That is a repeatable playbook that you can leverage. And then very often, right, you'll see CSOs or other opportunities that may be published by DIU that you can go after directly. Historically, we have done some stuff with the UK MOD, with DASA and DSTL. There are awards there that are available that can help you start to build some of that, I'll say, credibility kind of across the ocean, if you will, to get your foot in the door in the US market too.
All right. And now looking at the component manufacturers, the same question. Let's say you have a high-tech component that is applicable in the defense space in various systems. How would you approach let's say, most of the time our companies are talking about approaching primes because they have the biggest systems. What are the first 3 steps if you have a component manufacturer here in Lithuania?
Yeah, so if you're looking at primes, there's a couple different ways. One, they do very often have CVC arms, corporate venture capital. These are sometimes true CVC taking an equity stake. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're more of a tech scouting function. So I would look for both. So start your customer discovery within your prime organizations as well. Those are systems in of itself that you need to navigate. Also reach out to some of these neo primes, and then also look at some of these, startup awards. If we or the federal government announces SBIR sitter awards to these companies, they themselves may be building bigger systems and looking for component manufacturers too, right? So there's an opportunity to plug into play in those folks. Or if there's a solicitation, you say, hey, that sounds like us. Maybe we can't participate because we don't have the eligibility criteria. A partnership or a sub to another organization within the US or things like that may be an opportunity for you to unlock. And very often primes are also looking at these SBIR awardees, either as strategic partners down the line or acquisition targets as well that would allow you to enter that supply chain that way.
Looking at component manufacturing, is presence in the US, be it a partner or your actual presence in the US with a LLC, is also preferable when dealing with primes and other system manufacturers?
So I would say that a physical presence in the US and a US entity is probably preferable. Doesn't mean that you can't do it the other way around. We can buy, or the primes can buy, components. But then you start to get into some of the ITAR and EAR kind of stuff. I'm not enough of a savant in that area to give you full nuance. You'd want to consult with a lawyer. But really the main difference is ITAR plugs into critical systems, think like true weapon systems. And EAR is the ability for us to kind of buy components or other things that maybe don't quite get into that territory. EAR is a much more simplified process. Like if I'm buying make it simple, I'm buying a wooden crate, that's probably an EAR thing that's a little bit easier. Whereas if I'm buying a weapon system, that ends up into ITAR. And that's where some of those regulations are. So as you're navigating, again, the caveat, I'm not a lawyer, so you probably need a lawyer for this one. But figure out if what I am building or what I'm supplying falls into an ITAR category or an EAR category, and then build accordingly, right? Sometimes it might be that there's a a widget within the widget that makes it ITAR, and you just want to sell that first widget, and it's an EAR, and it's a much easier way to get into that supply chain.
Okay. And now you just mentioned ITAR a couple of times, and we will come back to that a bit later because we had some pre-sent questions on that as well. But to finish off on the components that we had a lot of questions on that. And looking at the shareholders at a company, let's say, for example, we have a joint company between Lithuania and Taiwan. Both countries friendly, right? Allies to US. Is there any nuance to that when you want to start to working with US companies, when your shareholder structure is a bit more complicated, but it's still coming from allied nations?
So to answer your question, yes. Now the SBIR sitter kind of process, it's that 51% US owned. So that's kind of the magic number. So that 49% can kind of be made up however. However, that being said, like let's say you're a venture-backed company, so you're taking on, let's say, non-risk adverse investors. So you're taking on that kind of capital. You need as a company to ask the question, not only where are your investors from, but where is their LP base and where's that money flowing from, right? It's about access and influence. The decisions for contracts ultimately come down to the program office and the level of risk that they want to accept based off your cap table. But as an early stage company, and I understand like it's very hard to do your balance sheet, run payroll and things like that sometimes. But you need to ask those questions about, hey, where are my LPs from? Or where are my investors from? Where are their LPs from? And where is that capital from? Before, because one of the early things that can derail you is taking that wrong check from that wrong investor, and then you become no longer eligible for certain things.
All right. Now looking at components as well, I think when we are thinking about component manufacturing, most of the times companies do similar things, right? Be it a laser optic or something else. There might be a company in US already producing something like that. Maybe a similar product, maybe a direct competitor, right? One-to-one comparison. Is there still space for Lithuanian companies to try and compete with US companies or other companies in the supply chain?
Yeah, I would say absolutely, right? Anything that you can do better, faster, cheaper, more efficiently, stronger, et cetera, all of those things make sense, right? I had a company a long time ago when I first started getting into this that was actually taking a Ukrainian design for a rocket engine. So it was a design originally from the 80s, but obviously, a little bit separated from time. But they got their foot in the door into the US market because they could 3D print this engine, and it was significantly cheaper, significantly lighter. It very much so started to replace things. It's now in a prime down the street as part of their kind of launch vehicle. So you can definitely compete. There's definitely an opportunity to do that. Everyone, especially the primes, are looking to maximize profitability and things like that. So if you're coming in, you're saying, hey, I'm cheaper, faster, lighter, stronger, better, et cetera, all those things are great. It's the same as us as people, right? Maybe, you don't want the TV with the big back end and weighs 800 pounds. You want the plasma TV. So very similar motivations. We want the best. We want to be able to go forward. There's always an opportunity to come in and compete.
All right. Now looking both into products and components and delving deeper about the establishing your presence in the US, that 51%, right? So for example, we have a lot of companies that have full manufacturing capabilities here in Lithuania, be it products or components, doesn't matter. And they establish that subsidiary in US with a US 51% shareholder structure. Is there an intrinsic interest from US side to move the actual manufacturing at some point from Lithuania to US? Or is there just, let's say, in simple words, a sales and service office in the US? How's that work?
Yeah, that's great. So there probably is a genuine interest to have manufacturing in the US, like just to call it out. I mean, it's we want people to live here, we want people to pay taxes, yada, 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 yada. However, I've worked with plenty of companies that, you know, they satisfy some of the requirements for super sitter. Now, if you're not going super sitter, you know, sure, you can build the components, you can sell into the supply chains, things like that. But if they're navigating super sitters, sometimes they will do some of the product development, some of the, you know, the pieces on, you know, one side, home country, and then do final assembly like in the US. So I've seen that as well too. It's just a little bit of nuance. You just want to satisfy kind of that 51%. I have had a few Australian companies that do all of their web development in Australia and then ultimately put everything together or have that sales office or that predominant, you know, US entity in the US. So you can do that as well. It's just kind of a different strategy that you as an entrepreneur kind of need to decide on, hey, this is how I want to go after it.
Sure, but in general, I guess the general approach and thinking about the long-term plan is if you want to work in the US, you need to work in the US, right?
Yeah, we want to see that there's a few different regulations like the Buy America Act and like things like that, where it's like, hey, we want to see development here, we want to see job growth here. Doesn't necessarily preclude you, but it may make things easier as you grow in your scale within the US market to have that US presence and do a lot of that work in the US.
Okay. Now, the next topic ties in quite nicely to what we just talked is IP. So one thing is establishing manufacturing or just establishing your subsidiary. But when you go through these programs and when you go through procurement system of DOW, how does IP work? Do you try to take it part of it, all of it, none of it? How does this topic work?
So again, caveat, not a lawyer, so always consult with your lawyer. This is not legal advice.
Sure.
But what I'll tell you is, at least on the SBIR side, things like that, right? The US government has, and how we navigate this, the SBIR data rights. So you maintain your IP, right? You have your IP for your commercial company. We on the federal side, we can use it or we can use what we discover for, you know, government purposes essentially, but you maintain the right. You're a company, you grow and scale. It's fundamentally yours. Now, what I will caveat is like, if you are entering agreements with, you know, other institutions or other organizations, that's not a one size fits all. That's why I say, hey, consult with your lawyer. Like you can redline stuff. So like if you enter a contractual agreement, like negotiation is basically going back and forth and sending red lines back and forth and crossing things out. Like if there are things around IP, like you can include those in contracts. You should include those, work with your lawyers. So don't just like go blindly into, you know, some, you know, Jimmy satellite company, be like, hey, I want to work with you. And then you get that contract and they've taken your IP, right? So make sure that you are working through that through the legal process, that contract gives you that entitlement to your IP as you go. And that's a real like lesson learned from folks that I have worked with in the past. They're like, hey, we worked with, you know, this organization, you know, this contractor basically wanted our IP. We had to redline it, blah, 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 blah. Still managed to get the deal done, but I'd always caveat you with like, hey, you can include that language, right? Include that language to maintain your IP, maintain your IP rights too.
All right. And this question stems from a particular situation here in Lithuania that we have several strong research centers.
Yeah.
Most of them are tied to universities, so they are public. But then when the companies are spun off from the research that is done in that center, part of the IP is still remains at the university. And it's a sort of a collaboration between university and the researchers that started a startup, for example. Now, if that particular startup comes into those programs where part of the IP belongs to a public entity, a university, a research center of Lithuania, is there a problem in that, or everything is fine here?
From my understanding, and again, I talked to a lawyer, but
Sure.
from my understanding, I think it would be fine. Where you might run into issues is with some US investors who might ask why they have that IP or why they might be on your cap table. I think any investor would actually ask that, even, you know, in various countries. That might be a thing there. It kind of depends. I don't know the nuance of like the Lithuanian university system, but like when we have folks come through the US system for like STTR, we always advise that you figure out how that IP agreement works with those tech transfer offices. And they're very different, at least over here. They all have different mechanisms, even if they're public universities, they have different ways of going about it. Some it makes sense because they actually extend you like the legal coverage of the university. Some don't make sense. So it just kind of depends. So what I would say is it's not necessarily a huge, issue if the university has the IP, but you do want to make sure that you have, kind of those caveats on that ownership for those eligibility criteria.
Yes. All right. Now, to top it off, I think the last questions, or just a question, would be about the four scary letters, right? ITAR. Now, I know you are not a lawyer, but the basic premise is that we have SMEs that are quite capable of producing components. Some of them are also quite capable of producing products at scale even. But ITAR is something that is, well, a bit scary and from one side and a bit difficult from the other side. Now, what would be your main recommendation? How smaller companies coming from Europe or Lithuania, for this matter, deal with ITAR?
So what I would tell you, right, again, I think I said the joke 3 times, so not a lawyer.
Yes, not a lawyer.
Secure your lawyer. That's you can't come after me now. I told you to get a lawyer. So a couple things on there. I would go back to saying, hey, is what I am building actually, does it actually fall into the realm of ITAR, right? So if you are doing something within a weapon system or things like that, yes, of course, and that is going to be a much more difficult road for you to go through. But is there a way for you to, let's say, downscope what you are building to be able to navigate without the ITAR rules? So I've had companies in the past that they made a widget, and within that widget, it was the let's say the button, I don't know, the button within the widget, that was the ITAR restricted component. And so when they went to other organizations or they went out the US, they just removed that and then built that component in that country or vice versa. That's a way to do it, right? You need to make sure it's not a broad like, hey, this whole thing, blah, blah, blah. It's the components and the things that you are building, right? Are they, do they fall under ITAR? And if they do, or if they don't, you want to make sure that you're kind of aligned on those regulations, if that makes sense. So as mentioned, like you could fall under EAR, which is a lot more simplified process, still has some, government oversight, but it's a little bit more simplified than ITAR. And so you may be able to go through EAR because your components, even though they end up in a DOW use case, they're not hitting a weapon system or some type of critical infrastructure where they need to go through ITAR. So that's kind of the advice I would give you is at first, other than get a lawyer, at first look and make sure that what you are building, does it actually fall under ITAR? And is there a way for me to navigate using EAR or another vehicle based off my solution and what I'm providing?
All right. So on that high note of ITAR, we are out of questions officially. Drew, thank you very much for your insights, for an amazing presentation. And to top it off, because we will be doing a business mission tied to the North American Lithuanian Business Forum, I think you will be a part of our program in some way. At least Andres is working to have you there. So I'm hoping to meet you with our companies in California in a couple of months, and we'll be able to talk more about defense and space related topics, right? Right. Good. So thank you again to Drew. And this is a first webinar in our series before the business mission and the North American Lithuanian Business Forum. The next one will be in February, and more information on that will come to your email inboxes quite soon. So thank you very much, and good night to Lithuanians, and good day to America. Cheers. Bye.